Our gracious God, create in us the awareness of the destructive forces that threaten our nation today, and awaken our sense of urgency to activate the forces of goodness, of justice, of love, and of peace. Move our hearts so that we may feel the pain and anguish of those who are suffering. Open our eyes so that we may clearly see our role in improving the lives of our fellow countrymen. Enlighten our minds so that we may understand the worth of all your creation. Instill in us your spirit so that we may always choose the right path that will lead us closer to your kingdom. All this we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. The singing scholars will lead us in singing the Philippine National Anthem, after which they will also render a song entitled Piliin Natin ang Pilipinas.
Langit mong bukaw, may dagang tulad ang sa paglayang minamahal.
Secretary, please call the roll. Thank you.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gonzalian,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Gordon,
Thank you.
Honasan, Monteveros, Lacson, Ligada, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberi, Senate President Bebente.
15 lang. With 15 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 18th session, Wednesday, September 6, 2017, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to acknowledge the Metrobank Foundation's 10 awardees for Outstanding Filipinos of 2017, composed of 4 teachers, 3 soldiers, and 3 policemen, headed, of course, by Mr. Chito Sobrepeña, the President of the Metrobank Foundation. Also, we'd like to acknowledge the guests, Bachelor in Office Administration students from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Santa Mesa, Manila, headed by Mr. Nartea, and the Asingan Retirees Association Incorporated of Asingan, Pangasinan. We would like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our guests and to the Metrobank awardees. Congratulations.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 30 August 2017, it concurred with the Senate amendments to the following House bills. 4934, entitled An Act Creating a Barangay to be known as Barangay San Isidro in the Municipality of Titay, Province of Zamboanga, Sibugay. 4937, entitled An Act Creating a Barangay to be known as Barangay Care in the City of Tarlac, Province of Tarlac. 4940, An Act Creating a Barangay to be known as Barangay Liwon in the Municipality of Asipolo, Province of Ifugao.
To the archives.
Bills on first reading. 1579, an act establishing the Filipino Identification System, introduced by Senator Sani Angara.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
1580, an act creating a Carabao Center in the city of Ligao in the province of Albay, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 7307, entitled An Act Creating the Philippine Carabao Center to propagate and promote the Philippine Carabao and for other purposes. Senator Subiri.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
Resolutions. 495, resolution congratulating and commending the members of the Philippine team who have won in their respective sports categories, thus bringing the country's medal haul to a total of 121 during the 29th Southeast Asian Games held on August 19 to 30, 2017 at Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committee on Rules.
496, a resolution urging the Senate Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality and Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct a joint investigation in aid of legislation into the spate of killings that involve children and youth. Senator Risa Hontiveros.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
Communication. Letter from the House, from the Office of the President of the Philippines, transmitting to the Senate 2 original copies of Republic Act number 10951 entitled An Act Adjusting the Amount or the Value of Property and Damage on which a penalty is based, and the fines imposed under the revised Penal Code, amending for the purpose Act number 3815, otherwise known as the revised Penal Code as amended, which was signed by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
To the archives.
Additional reference of business resolutions. Resolution number 497, resolution commending Andre Makabuhay for being a paragon of honesty despite hardships experienced by his family when he, without hesitation, returned money that did not belong to him. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Rules.
498, resolution urging the Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the spate of killings of minors and other youth that resulted from the government's war against drugs in either police operations or vigilante-style killings, in order to reevaluate and enforce the rules of engagement of the Philippine National Police in arresting children in conflict with the law, and to establish efficient avenues for giving assistance to families of victims. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
499, resolution directing the appropriate Senate Committee to investigate in aid of legislation all reported deaths of children and young individuals within the context of the Philippine government's campaign against drug trafficking and other state actions not aligned with human rights obligations of the Philippines. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
500, a resolution expressing the sense of the Senate to join the community of nations and parliaments around the world in commemorating the 20th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Democracy. Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Chamber, I move for the consideration of PS Resolution 478, taking into consideration PS Resolutions 484, 485, 486, 490, and 492.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, the motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title, only the title of the measure, without prejudice to inserting into the records the entire text of the resolution.
Secretary.
Resolution honoring and commending the Metro Bank Foundation Outstanding Filipinos of 2017.
Mr. President, I move that Senator Pamphilo Lacson be recognized to sponsor the measure. Afterwards, co-sponsors, Senators Pacquiao, Binay, Zubiri, Legarda, and Villanueva will likewise deliver their sponsorship speeches.
Senator Lacson is recognized.
Mr. President, fellow members of this august chamber, I have the honor to present resolution number 478 entitled Resolution Honoring and Commending the Metrobank Foundation Outstanding Filipinos of 2017. While some may have failed to realize that public office is never about ambition, money, or power, the Filipino people are still fortunate to have public servants who value aspirations more than ambition, who regard modesty over money, and who exercise leadership more than power. Mr. President, we are grateful to have our 10 outstanding Filipino awardees today who proved that selflessness in public service is not an empty phrase, but rather a collective aspiration. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we find hope in the likes of teachers Jennifer Rojo and Edgar Elago, Master Micrologist Dr. Esperanza Cabrera, and food security advocate Dr. Alonso Gabriel, who have pioneered leading innovations and educational strategies in their respective fields. These educators prove that commitment to civic duties can break the culture of complacency. Further, Mr. President, we can look up to our soldiers like Staff Sergeant Narding N. Pascual of the Philippine Army, Lieutenant Colonel Elmer B. Suderio, and Lieutenant Colonel Ricky P. Bunayog, who braved the front lines of the battlegrounds and performed beyond the bounds of duty to serve our beloved country. Amidst the controversies that surround the Philippine National Police as an institution, Police Officer 3 Sheila May S. Pansoy, Police Chief Inspector Rosalino P. Ibay Jr., and Police Senior Superintendent Joel B. Doria serve as inspirations in carrying out the PNP's mandate to serve and protect. Notable indeed, among our officers' accomplishments is how they were able to take on a community-oriented approach in the fight against criminality with high regard on human rights, morality, and integrity. Mr. President, without a doubt, our 10 outstanding Filipinos of 2017 are among the patriots who contribute to the noble pursuit of genuine public service and good governance. They deserve nothing but our snappiest salute. This is also an opportune time to commend the Metrobank Foundation for staying true to its vision of promoting a culture of professionalism, excellence, and heroism. The Metrobank Foundation has always been instrumental in inspiring our fellow Filipinos towards the highest ideals of public service. In view of the foregoing, Mr. President, this representation urges this august body to adopt Senate Resolution 478 honoring and commending the Metrobank Foundation Outstanding Filipinos of 2017. Thank you very much and have a good day.
In this speech, I just wanted to join him for everyone. Sabihin ko lang. Ikaw ba? Magbabasa.
Majority Leader.
I'll just say something.
We're supposed to recognize Senator Pacquiao, Binay, Subiri, Ligarda, Villanueva, but Senator Ligarda wishes to have the floor, Mr. President.
Senator Ligarda is recognized.
Mr. President, I simply wanted to associate myself with the speech of the sponsor, Senator Ping Lacson, having been a chairman previously of the Metrobank Foundation, and I laud this very important project, and it's heartwarming. I spoke with each and every one of them there at the back, including the policemen, the teachers, and the military men, and it's really heartwarming to have such accomplished Filipinos in this day. Thank you.
Go. Oh, yes, sir.
Majority Leader, Senator Gordon is raising his hand.
Mr. President,
Senator Gordon is recognized.
thank you, Mr. President. I would like to associate myself and be part of the sponsorship of the resolution of Senator Lacson. Not only because I was once a judge among the outstanding teachers, but also because I'd like to commend companies like Metro Bank for doing this wonderful corporate social responsibility, so that for a change we recognize good deeds, we recognize good challenges, and we make the Filipino feel that he can accomplish something and not just be recognized, but really be a model of excellence for our people. And that is why I stand here today, very proud of these gentlemen and ladies from our military, our police, and our school teachers, because they are the ones that carry the heavy load of peace and order and creating values for our students, especially since the teachers have more time now than with the children than with their parents. And they are the ones that will give us the competitive edge when it comes to competing in the future. As far as the Army is concerned, we all know that many have shed blood for our people in the insurgency. And as far as the policemen, it's also good to know that there are still many policemen who will not go the way of being outside the law, of liquidating people and making sure that they can follow the law, because that is what the police is all about. The police are the citizens' force under the social contract theory. That would really mean that they follow the trust that the people have reposed on them to allow them to carry weapons for the protection and not for the persecution of our people. On that note, congratulations to Metro Bank, congratulations to the teachers, the police, and the military. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. After those manifestations, we now continue with the sponsorship speeches. So we recognize Senator Binay, Subiri, Legarda has already made manifestation, and Villanueva. That is the lineup, Mr. President. Senator Binay.
Senator Binay is recognized.
Mr. President, my esteemed colleagues, it is my privilege and honor to co-sponsor a resolution commending the awardees of 2017 Metrobank Foundation's Outstanding Filipinos. Today, we recognize the efforts and sacrifices of ordinary Filipinos who devoted themselves to make the lives of our countrymen better. Kinikilala natin ngayon ang talino, galing at pagmamalasakit ng mga lingkod bayan na naging totoo sa kanilang sinumpaang tungkulin na magturo at maghulma ng kaisipan ng ating mga kabataan, pagsilbihan at pangalagaan ang kapakanan ng bawat Pilipino at protektahan ang ating inang bayan. Sa ating 4 na guro, 3 pulis at 3 sundalong gagawaran ngayon, nais kong ipaabot ang aking mainit na pagbati at papuri sa inyong mga nagawa para mapabuti ang ating bayan. These exemplary ladies and gentlemen have shown us that through their work and dedication to the people they serve, we can truly make a positive difference. Truly, all of you are modern-day heroes. To our educators, I know for a fact that teaching is not only a profession, but a calling. My grandmother was a teacher, and my father continues on with his teaching at the University of Makati College of Law. Teaching not only requires time, skills, and knowledge, it requires one's wholehearted dedication to educate and mold the minds of our youth. Coincidentally, we are also celebrating the National Teachers Month from September 5 to October 5. Kaya po, maraming salamat po sa inyo, mga mahal naming guro. To the brave members of our Philippine National Police, please continue to stand tall. Despite the controversies and issues that your ranks are currently facing, you are the silver lining that keep us believing that our children are safe on our streets. Ipagpatuloy po ninyo ang inyong magiting na paglilingkod. Sumasaludo po ang sambayan ng Pilipino sa inyo. And lastly, to our soldiers, my heart goes to you and your families. I know your accomplishments, your gallantry on the battlefield, and your efforts to preserve peace in Mindanao. I empathize with your sacrifice to be separated from your families so that you can accomplish your duty. Kayo po ang halimbawa ng profesional na sundalong Filipino, matapang, tapat at marangal. To be named an outstanding Filipino is a confirmation and testament of your passion to serve our countrymen. Thank you for being our partner in nation building. You are an inspiration to us all. I would also like to recognize the Metrobank Foundation Incorporated for its continued devotion in promoting and recognizing excellence in public service. Congratulations to Metrobank Foundation Inc. President Aniceto Sobrepeña and to Metrobank Group Chairman Dr. George SKT for continuing this inspiring tradition for more than 30 years. Mabuhay po kayo, mabuhay ang Filipino.
Mr. President, may we now recognize Senator Mig Zubiri.
Senator Zubiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I believe I am now in order. As the first time I stood up, I think I was out of order at that time, stealing the thunder of our sponsors. This time, Mr. Chair, will be just a short privilege motion allowing me to commend the 2017 Metrobank Foundation outstanding Filipinos. The said award seeks to recognize those who have proven their mettle for service to the Filipino. I also sponsored and filed PS Resolution 492 congratulating and commending these outstanding Filipinos. This year's awardees, which we're lucky and happy to have with us today, are 10 remarkable individuals from the academe, military, the police sectors, and whose service has had a positive and enduring impact on our people and our country. They have inspired and influenced significant changes in our society with their service. They have redefined public service with their selfless devotion to their respective professions. I would like to also note, Mr. President, that our very own Senator Panfilo Lacson was the chairperson of the final Board of Judges, and I congratulate him for undertaking this very crucial role in coming up with this year's roster of awardees. And I'd like to also commend the Metrobank Foundation for recognizing the talents and heroism of these great Filipinos for the last several decades. Congratulations as well to the Foundation's 55th anniversary celebrated this year. Once again, let me congratulate and commend this year's outstanding Filipinos, namely Ms. Jennifer Rojo, Mr. Edgar Elago, Dr. Esperanza Cabrera, Dr. Alonzo Gabriel, Staff Sergeant Narding Pascual, Lieutenant Colonel Elmer Suderio, Lieutenant Colonel Ricky P. Bunayog, PO3 Sheila May Pansoy, Chief Inspector Rosalino Ibay Jr., and Senior Superintendent Joel B. Doria. Thank you to these men and women for your service to our country and to our people. Maraming salamat at mabuhay po sila lahat, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Senator Joel Villanueva wishes to co-sponsor the measure also, Mr. President.
Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. Isa pong magandang hapon sa ating lahat. I am honored to co-sponsor Senate Resolution numbers 478, 484, 485, 486, 490, and 492. Alam niyo po, likas talaga sa mga Pilipino ang kabayanihan. Marahil dahil ito sa mahabang kasaysayan ng pakikibaka ng ating mga ninuno para matamo ang inaasam-asam na kalayaan. Sa paglipas po ng panahon, uminog ang konsepto ng pagiging bayani. Makikita ang kabayanihan ngayon sa iba't ibang paraan, pagtulong sa kapwa Pilipino sa oras ng kagipitan, pagsasakripisyo alang-alang sa pamilya at mga mahal sa buhay, at ang pinaka-espesyal sa lahat, ang pag-aalay ng husay at talento para sa pag-unlad ng ating bayan. Lagi pong nariyan ang mga pagsubok at hamon sa atin bilang isang bansa. Kaya't higit nating kailangan ang mga Pilipinong may pagmamalasakit sa kapwa. Kailangan natin ang mga Pilipinong handang mag-alay ng kanilang talino, creativity, innovation, serbisyo, research, puyat at pagod para sa kapakanan ng nakararami. Kaya't humahanga po ako, Ginoong Pangulo, sa Metrobank Foundation, partikular sa Pangulo nito, kay Ginoong Aniceto Sobrepeña, sa patuloy nilang pagtuklas, pagkilala at pagbibigay halaga sa mga outstanding Filipinos. Paalala, lalo na sa mga kabataan, na sa kabila ng lahat ng mga pagsubok sa ating bayan, mabuti ang mga Pilipino, magaling ang mga Pilipino, masarap maging Pilipino. Mr. President, allow me to congratulate our modern-day Filipino heroes, the recipients of Career Service Award for Outstanding Filipinos in Academe, the military, and police. Our outstanding teacher change makers through education and research, Ms. Jennifer Rojo, Mr. Edgar Elago, Dr. Esperanza Cabrera, and Dr. Alonzo Gabriel. Our outstanding soldiers who risk their lives to keep our country safe 24/7, Staff Sergeant Narding Pascual, Lieutenant Colonel Elmer Suderio, and Lieutenant Colonel Ricky Bunayog. And our outstanding police officers who serve and protect our people with great honor, dedication, and courage. Police Officer 3, Sheila May Pansoy, Police Chief Inspector Rosalino Ibay Jr., and Police Senior Superintendent Joel Doria. Sa inyo pong lahat ng mga outstanding Filipinos, isang aral po ang ibinigay nyo sa aming lahat. Kung paiiralin ang kabayanihang likas sa ating mga Pilipino, sa anumang larangan, sa maliit man o malaking paraan, tunay na may pagbabago at pag-asa sa ating minamahal na bansang Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. Finally, Mr. President, I believe that our country needs more teachers. We need more soldiers, more policemen who will persist in finding means to work effectively and thus serve society better amidst problems. It is in this regard that I continue to call our colleagues to support measures that will improve the social and economic welfare of our teachers, soldiers, and policemen to attract more young Filipinos to these noble professions. Pagtulong-tulungan po natin na maibigay ang nararapat na suporta sa ating mga guro, pinakamalapit sa ating mga puso, gayon din sa mga sundalo at pulis na lubos po nating hinahangaan. Napakalaki po talaga ng magagawa nila sa loob man ng classroom o sa lansangan para muling buhayin ang diwang makabansa, pagkakaisa at pagmamalasakit sa kapwa ng bawat Pilipino. Again, Mr. President, thank you for serving our country, our beloved country, and making a difference, and may God bless us all.
Majority Leader.
Finally, Mr. President, the Minority Leader, Senator Franklin Drilon.
Senator Drilon is recognized, the Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I stand to associate myself with the good sponsor of proposed Senate Resolution number 478. Mr. President, it was in 2002, or 15 years ago, during our presidency of this chamber, that the Senate started passing resolutions commending the various awardees of the Metro Bank Foundation. 15 years ago, we passed the first resolution of commendation, and today, in every ceremony commending these national heroes, the Senate resolution is always part of the mementos given and handed to them. Mr. President, I have associated myself with this project of the Metro Bank Foundation since 1991, or over quarter of a century ago. And every year, I would attend the awarding ceremonies. This awarding was started by Metro Bank Foundation when they first recognized the 10 outstanding teachers in 1984, or 33 years ago. And since we got active and associated ourselves with these three awards, we were always amazed at the acts of heroism displayed by the various awardees year in and year out. So it is with deep pleasure, Mr. President, an honor that we have supported and associated ourselves with this commendable project of the Metro Bank Foundation, Dr. George S.K.T. and Mr. Aniceto Sobrepeña, for this outstanding project undertaken by the Metro Bank Foundation. As I said, it was in 1991 when I was the executive secretary, when this representation was the executive secretary, that we chaired the Board of Judges for the outstanding teachers, outstanding policemen, and outstanding soldiers at that time. And as we said, we have kept track of these awards for the last over a quarter of a century when we got ourselves involved as chair of the Metro Bank Foundation Outstanding Teachers, Policemen, and Soldiers way back in 1991. It is in this context that we stand this afternoon once more to associate ourselves and honorable and put our support and vote for proposed Senate Resolution 478. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the co-sponsorship speech of Senator Honasan and Senator Manny Pacquiao be inserted into the records.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I move for the approval of PS Resolution 478, taking into consideration all the other resolutions, may we know from the sponsor, Senator Lacson, if he is willing to make the President Pro Tem, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader as co-sponsors of the measure, Mr. President?
Wholeheartedly, Mr. President. It will be my honor.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. So with that,
The Majority Leader accepts the amendment that he suggested to Senator Lacson.
yes. So moved, Mr. President.
So any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, with the permission of the Chamber, I move to adopt PS Resolution 478, taking into consideration PS Resolution 484, 485, 486, 490, and 492, subject to style, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we ask that all the members of all the senators present be made also as co-sponsors, Mr. President.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, motion is approved.
May we have a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President, to allow the awardees a photo op with Senate President Pro Tem.
Session suspended. Chito. Thank you.
Wala sila. Hindi, may lagdan. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, to speak on a matter of public interest, may we recognize Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat po, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise on a point of personal and collective privilege. I rise to bring your attention to the unethical conduct of an official of the executive branch of government. Noong Martes, September 5, ay ginanap sa ilalim ng Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs ang pangalawang hearing patungkol sa karimari-marim na pagpatay kay Kian Lloyd de los Santos ng police operatives ng Caloocan City. Sa hearing na ito,
Isa sa mga resource speakers ang DOJ Secretary na si Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre. Marami pong mga media at audience sa gallery nung araw na yon, gawa nga ng napakahalagang pinag-uusapan. Ang isa sa mga ito ay nakakuha ng photo ni Secretary Aguirre. Ito pong photo niya na nagte-text. Sa unang tingin, walang kakaiba sa larawang ito. Lahat naman tayo ay napapasilip-silip sa cellphone sa gitna ng Senate hearing. Ngunit, Mr. President, nabahala ang kumuha nung i-enlarge niya ang larawan ni Ginoong Aguirre. The photographer was inadvertently able to capture the text message exchange on the screen of the phone of the DOJ Secretary. Babasahin ko po ang nakalagay. Text sa kanya ng kausap niya. Naturuan na ni Ontiveros ang testigo. Her questions are leading questions. Reply ni Sec Aguirre, yun nga sinasabi ko dito. Very obvious. Kaya nga, expedite natin ang cases nyo against her. Pinasuri po namin ang larawan sa mga experts at pinatototohanan nila ang authenticity nito. Ang katext po ni Sec Aguirre ay isang kongjing. Sa akin pong pagtatanong-tanong, nasabi sa akin na malamang sa malamang ang kongjing na tinutukoy ay si former Negros Oriental Representative Jacinto Jing Paras, na miyembro ng Volunteers Against Crime and Corruption, VACC, at kilala ng marami sa atin. Matatandaan na ang grupong ito ang nag-file ng impeachment case laban kay Chief Justice Sereno at nag-announce na magfa-file din ng impeachment laban kay Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales. Kabilang din sa VACC si Attorney Ferdinand Ferdy Topacio. Noong nakaraang Huwebes nga, si former Rep. Paras at si Attorney Ferdy Topacio ay sumugod sa opisina ko para bawiin ang mga witnesses na nasa poder ni Bishop David, gamit ang tatay na pinalaya mula sa Caloocan City Jail. This, Mr. President, despite the consent letters we had from the witness's mother in Oman, from her 22-year-old sister, and from the father himself. Nagsinungaling pa sila sa media na hindi daw ipinaalam sa tatay ang pagkupkop sa anak nito. Gayong hawak namin ang pruweba na hindi lang sa sinangguni ang tatay, ang anak niya mismo ang nagpaalam sa kanya na kay Bishop maglalagi. Noong Sabado ng gabi nga, sumugod sila sa Bishop's residence sa Caloocan para kunin ang mga witness na menor de edad gamit ang tatay na inilabas sa preso. Laking gulat nila nung ang bitbit nilang tatay na akala nila ay alas nila ay bumaliktad at nagsabing sasama na rin siya kay Bishop David at tatalikuran ang VACC at CIDG. Sayang, Mr. President, marami pa namang matitino sa VACC, kagaya ni Ginoong Boy Evangelista. Ngunit ang ilan sa kanila ay pumayag na maging kasangkapan sa pagsisinungaling ng administrasyon. Pawang kasinungalingan, Mr. President. Kaya nga po, Mr. President, ako po'y lubos na nababahala. First of all, by saying tinuruan ko ang testigo, is Secretary Aguirre accusing me of witness manipulation? Iyan po'y isang napakalaking akusasyon. I'd like to know exactly what part of the testimony of the witness, MC, did not pass the bar of truth of the good secretary. What part of it did he think was a product of my manipulation? Sa totoo lang, the testimony of the witness was consistent with the findings of the ballistic exam and with the post-mortem reports of both PAO and the PNP Crime Lab. She did not implicate anyone surprising, nor name any perpetrators beyond those already suspended. Moreover, The DOJ is handling the case filed by the NBI, which relied upon the testimonies of these witnesses. Ang sinasabi ba niya ay itong witnesses na ito ay minanipula o tinuruan? Gayong haharap ang mga witness na ito sa kanilang departamento para sa preliminary investigation. At best, Mr. President, this undermines the Bureau and the Department's own work. Second, Mr. President, is the DOJ Secretary plotting a case against a sitting senator while a Senate proceeding is going on right inside the Senate Session Hall? Habang tayo'y naghihiring para makamit natin ang katarungan para sa isang 17-year-old na pinatay ng pulis na nakadapa sa lupa, mukhang ang pinagkakaabalahan ng ating Justice Secretary ay paano makaganti sa kanyang kalaban. Mr. President, kung kaya ito gawin ng Justice Secretary sa isang sitting senator, ano pa kaya sa ibang mga mamamayang Pilipino? The culture of political vindictiveness that allows a Justice Secretary to make a mockery of justice springs from the same poisonous well as the culture of impunity that encourages some police personnel to plant evidence, fabricate stories about their targets, and become cold-blooded killers. Hindi ako magtataka, Mr. President, kung sa mga susunod na araw ay may mga kaso ng isasampalaban sa akin si Justice Secretary o ng kanyang mga galamay sa VACC. If the Justice Secretary wants to file cases against me, see you in court, Mr. Aguirre. Third, Mr. President, I can't help but think that this supports the growing perception that cases are being filed against members of the opposition in order to silence and harass us. Si Senator Laila, kinasuhan ng drug charges gamit ang mga testigo na convicted criminals, malinaw na paglabag sa batas hinggil sa state witnesses. I believe that public service is a public trust, and we, public officials, should be subjected to the highest scrutiny. But it seems to me that the motivation of the Secretary is not the pursuit of accountability, but the pursuit of political vendetta. Our laws on accountability should be weapons for truth and better governance, not weapons wielded against political opponents who do not toe the line. Mr. President, parliamentary immunity as guaranteed in our Constitution is an essential part of our polity. To quote the words of the Supreme Court in the case of Pobre versus Defensor Santiago, legislators are immune from deterrence to the uninhibited discharge of their legislative duties, not for their private indulgence, but for the public good. The privilege would be of little value if they could be subjected to the cost and inconvenience and distractions of a trial upon a conclusion of the pleader, or to the hazard of a judgment against them based upon a judge's speculation as to the motives. Close quote. I am calling on my colleagues in the Senate, Mr. President. Perhaps it is due time to review provisions of law, both in the Constitution and in the revised Penal Code, on parliamentary immunities and privileges, and our right, as well as the right of the people we represent, to be protected from these baseless suits. Opposition legislators voted by the people are charged on the flimsiest of evidence. Criminal cases are being used as weapons by the executive against the legislature. Let me spell out why the behavior of the Justice Secretary is so unethical, Mr. President, and so unbecoming a member of the civil service. Here is the Secretary of Justice, the head of the principal law agency of government, and whose functions include the prosecution of offenders. He has supervision and control over prosecutors who conduct preliminary investigations to determine whether or not there is probable cause against an accused. Kung sa simpleng lengguwahe ng kalye, ang opisina niya ang nagpapasya kung tutuluyan ang kaso laban sa akusado. Anyone with that kind of power must hold himself to the highest standard of impartiality. But this is apparently not important to the good secretary. Siya po'y nakikipagkuntsabahan sa isang grupo para magsampa ng kaso. Kaso na opisina din niya ang magpapasya kung may probable cause o wala. There are no words, Mr. President, for this kind of lutong Macau. There are no words. Mr. President, hindi na bago sa atin ang kapalpakan ng Secretary of Justice. Hindi ba siya din ang nagkalat noong kasagsagan ng pagbomba ng Marawi na sina Senator Bam at Senator Sani Trillanes ay nagpunta sa Marawi at nakapagpulong sa mga sangkot sa siege? Hindi ba opisina niya ang nag-downgrade ng kaso ng mga pulis na pumaslang kay Albuera Mayor Rolando Espinosa? Hindi ba siya ang nakipagkita kay Jack Lam sa isang hotel sa The Fort, bagamat si Jack Lam ay may mga hinaharap na kasong nakahain at iniimbestigahan? All these lead me to the conclusion, Mr. President, that there is no other respectable option but to call on the Justice Secretary to resign. He is in violation of Republic Act 6713, or the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees. To quote Section 4B of the said law, public officials and employees shall perform and discharge their duties with the highest degree of excellence, professionalism, intelligence, and skill. They shall enter public service with utmost devotion and dedication to duty. They shall endeavor to discourage wrong perceptions of their roles as dispensers or peddlers of undue patronage. Secretary Aguirre undermines our justice system, and his continued stay in office is a vulgar insult to the Filipino people and our efforts for a more just society. Further, Mr. President, we must not allow attempts to thwart or diminish our constitutionally guaranteed right to parliamentary immunity. No legislator must be threatened with arrest or imprisonment for acts which she or he believes in good faith to be within the realm of functions reposed in her or him by the Constitution. It is time we revisit the concept of parliamentary immunity from arrest to ensure that a legislator cannot be prevented from attending to her or his duty as a member of Congress. While there are indeed constitutional safeguards available to an accused by the Constitution, and while these safeguards may constitute an obstacle to overreach and abuse of power by the prosecuting arm of the government, recent events have caused our reliance on such assurance to become irresolute. While the rights of an individual under the Constitution are vast, we need to examine whether these are adequate. If found wanting, then it is our duty to craft the appropriate measures to fill the gap. Given, Mr. President, that at the heart of this issue I bring before the Senate is the ethical conduct of a government official, and considering that I am seeking the review of our constitutional provisions on parliamentary immunity, I am respectfully moving to refer my speech to the Committees on Civil Service primarily and to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Codes secondarily. Marami pong salamat, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may we recognize the Minority Leader to interpellate?
The Senate Minority Leader, Franklin Drilon, is recognized.
Just a few questions, Mr. President, if the lady will yield the floor.
Very gladly, Mr. President.
Mr. President, you have polled for the designation of Secretary Aguirre. Did I hear you correctly that this is based on, is it Section 4 of
Section
Republic
4A.
Act? I'm sorry?
Yes, Mr. President, Section
4
4A.
of Republic Act 6713 or the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for public officials. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, you know, Mr. President, I have been trying to compare our setup in the Department of Justice and the Secretary of Justice with the Secretary of Justice in the United States. My impression, just based on media reports, is that it would appear that the Secretary of Justice in the United States government enjoys a certain degree of independence from the President. And this is necessarily so because the Secretary of Justice is supposed to uphold the rule of law, prosecute the offenders, and regardless of political affiliation and loyalty, he is supposed, the Secretary of Justice in the United States is supposed to proceed in accordance with how he reads the law. My impression is that in this country, in our system, the Secretary of Justice is being a political appointee, appears to be under the control and supervision of the President, and therefore has no independent judgment insofar as enforcement of the law is concerned. Is that a correct impression, Mr. President?
Unfortunately, Mr. President, past and very recent events would seem to bear that out. I think the situation that the good gentleman pointed out in another country with regards another Secretary of Justice is quite enviable. And yet, Mr. President, during his sponsorship speech of the Code of Conduct for Public Officials, then Senator Rene Saguisag did say, loyalty is something we often hear about these days. But to what is loyalty and to whom is it owed? Public servants in the civilian and military sectors are enjoined and exhorted at all times to uphold the Constitution and to put loyalty to flag and country above loyalty to persons, party, and faction. And I only wish, good gentleman, that this was observed less in the breach by our own Secretary of Justice here in the Philippines.
Thank you, Senator Hontiveros. Again, on the topic and the issue of impartiality. In the committee hearings on the killing of Kian de los Santos, this representation has strongly suggested to the Secretary of Justice, Secretary Aguirre, that maybe he should defer to the Ombudsman insofar as the investigation of the killing of Kian de los Santos is concerned, because of the perception of lack of impartiality. We have gone on record and publicly have asked the Secretary of Justice to, in effect, inhibit himself from this investigation and leave to the Ombudsman the matter of investigating the policemen involved, given the history, as pointed out by Senator Hontiveros, of perceptions of partiality. Now, does the good lady senator share this view that we have taken in the course of the committee investigation, and has the good senator suggested the same to the good Secretary of Justice?
Yes, Mr. President. In various fora after the good gentleman aired that view, I expressed that I wholeheartedly share his view that in the spirit and interest of impartiality and the pursuit of justice, I likewise demanded that the Justice Secretary inhibit himself from all investigations being conducted into the killing of Kian. And secondly, Mr. President, I asked the Secretary to cease from offering the 3 witnesses who were then under the protective custody of the Senate and who afterwards, until now, are under the protective custody of the good bishop, to cease offering them to be covered by the Witness Protection Program of the DOJ. Because as the good gentleman from Iloilo also pointed out, after the Secretary's many one-sided statements in Senate hearings and even media interviews, it was plain to see that he had lost all credibility to hear Kian's case. And I repeat here what I've said before, that placing the witnesses in the Secretary's quote-unquote care would have been like delivering sheep into the lion's den, Mr. President.
And I'm interested, how did the Secretary of Justice respond to the good senator on that point?
Well, Mr. President, the Secretary said he had no problem with inhibiting, but that I should also inhibit myself from the Senate probe. At one point, he tagged me as a quote-unquote drama queen for demanding his inhibition and demanded that I state which cases exactly he has intervened in. There are some I could mention, Mr. President, but as to that drama queen tagging, well, Mr. President, pwede ako sa rom-com, pwede pa sa adventure, pero si Good Secretary hanggang kontrabida lang po, Mr. President.
Maybe he had in mind your being a child protege of Repertory Philippines, where you had a lot of acting roles, Mr. President.
I hope the good secretary's attitude when he uttered those words was as kind as that of the good gentleman.
By the way, by the way, for the record, who has custody now of these minor children that you have, witnesses who are minors? Is it Bishop David?
Yes, Mr. President. After the witnesses were discharged as witnesses of the Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, after they had testified, then the protective custody of the Senate over them ceased, and they were turned over to the continuing custody of the good Caloocan Bishop Pablo Virgilio David, Mr. President.
Yes. Mr. President, in the course of the speech of the lady, mention was made of former Congressman Jacinto Jing Paras and Attorney Topacio. Just to remind us, can the good senator read again the contents of the messages and exchanges between the good secretary and either Congressman Paras or Attorney Topacio, for the record?
Yes, Mr. President. I will reread here the exchange between Secretary Aguirre and someone named Kong Jing. The Kong Jing said, "Naturuan na ni Ontiveros yung testigo. Her questions are leading questions." And the Secretary replied, "Yun nga sinasabi ko kanina dito, very obvious. Kaya expedite natin ang cases ninyo against her." End of exchange.
So the substance of this is that he was encouraging, or in fact, or even directing Congressman Paras and Attorney Topacio to expedite the cases against Senator Hontiveros.
Yes, Mr. President. He was he enjoined Kong Jing to expedite their cases, presumably VACC's cases against me, Mr. President.
And where are the cases supposed to be filed? I assume with the Department of Justice?
Well, that's why, Mr. President, I was so bothered by finding out about this, because nagmumukha po talagang lutong Macau. Sabi ko nga po ay nakikipagkuntsabahan siya sa isang grupo na maghain ng kaso laban sa akin, kaso na departamento niya mismo ang magdidesisyon kung may probable cause o hindi at kung tutuluyan ang kaso laban sa akusado. So, napaka-unethical po, Mr. President, at napaka walang pagrespeto dun sa constitutional guarantees on immunity para sa mga mambabatas, Mr. President.
Mr. President, former Congressman Paras and Verdi Topacio, to my knowledge, are members of the legal profession. They are both lawyers, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
since they are not public officials, what standards would govern their conduct as legal practitioners?
Well, Mr. President, though they are not holding public office as members of the legal profession, they are bound by the Code of Professional Responsibility. And this code applies with equal force to Secretary Aguirre, since Canon 6 specifically states that these canons shall apply to lawyers in government services in the discharge of their tasks. But as this conversation showing connivance clearly shows, Secretary Aguirre and Kong Jing failed to adhere to the Code of Professional Responsibility, particularly Canon 1, Rule 1.02. A lawyer shall not counsel or abet activities aimed at defiance of the law or at lessening confidence in the legal system. Canon 10, Rule 10.01. A lawyer shall not do any falsehood, nor consent to the doing of any in court, nor shall he mislead or allow the court to be misled by any artifice. And Canon 12, Rule 12.04, a lawyer shall not unduly delay a case, impede the execution of a judgment, or misuse court processes, Mr. President.
I'm sure, Mr. President, that many lawyers do not know this canon. Ethics is it's only 2 units in college, but never mind. While you were delivering your speech, the Majority Leader and I were talking about where to refer the speech. And the Majority Leader said he has some difficulty trying to figure it out. But I noticed that you moved that for a referral to the Committee on Civil Service. Why would this be to the Civil Service, Mr. President?
I move, Mr. President, for my speech's referral to the Committee on Civil Service primarily, and to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Codes secondarily. To the Committee on Civil Service primarily, Mr. President, because the heart and soul of the speech touches on ethical conduct, or in this case, I'm averring unethical conduct on the part of a public official, on the part of a member of the civil service, Mr. President. And also secondarily to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes, because in my speech, Mr. President, I also call on our chamber to review if the constitutional guarantees on immunities of legislators are currently sufficiently spelled out so as to afford this guarantee or this privilege to all members of the legislature in the proper conduct of our legislative duties, Mr. President.
Just one final point, and this is concerning the witnesses who are admittedly minors and which gave rise to all these problems that you're bringing to this chamber. By the way, for the record, the witnesses are all minors, Mr. President?
Mr. President, there were 3 witnesses in the Senate's custody, 2 of whom were minors, and the third, the last one, is an adult, Mr. President.
Now, did the parents of the minors consent to your office having custody of these witnesses, for the record?
For the record, Mr. President, yes, with respect to the youngest witness. As to the older but also minor witness, consent was given by her guardians. Her guardians gave consent because her guardians are serving as the de facto guardians since she had been living with their family or with the guardian's family. As for the youngest minor witness, Mr. President, her father delegated her 22-year-old sister to serve as guardian of her sister. Her mother sent a notarized consent for her daughter, the youngest minor, to testify, and delegated her sister of legal age as guardian, and the guardian of legal age gave written consent for her minor sibling to testify, and granting custody at first to my office and then to the Senate, Mr. President.
So this consent this consent given was in writing and duly notarized?
Yes, Mr. President. All these documents of consent are in writing and duly notarized, including the one sent by the OFW mother from abroad through the Philippine consulate in that country.
Just one final point, just for the record. After you have taken custody of these witnesses pursuant to the written authority or consent, has any agency been denied access to these witnesses?
Never, Mr. President. As I had repeatedly stated, if the Public Attorney's Office had wanted to get the testimonies of the witnesses, they were and still are free to do so. In fact, the Commission on Human Rights, the National Bureau of Investigation under the department, and the Office of the Ombudsman have already done so. In fact, the NBI filed a case based on the testimony, the affidavits of the witnesses. The Bureau filed a case in the DOJ, and there are already scheduled 2 hearings in the next weeks, Mr. President. So all agencies who have wanted to get the testimonies of the witnesses and interview them have been free to do so. 3 have already done so, including the NBI of the DOJ. There was no need for anyone to take custody of the witnesses just in order to get their testimonies, Mr. President, and cases are already filed based on these testimonies of the witnesses, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Hontiveros. Thank you very much for spreading to the record those vital information. We no longer have questions, Mr. President, and we thank Senator Hontiveros for yielding the floor for those clarificatory questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the good minority leader.
Mr. President,
Would the distinguished lady restate the motion she made earlier?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. President, before she does that, if you do not mind, and she will not mind, I will first confirm what the minority leader said concerning the predicament that I was in. As a matter of fact, I was voicing it with him. And initially, we were discussing public accountability, perhaps justice. Now, the distinguished lady was putting forth a motion that was not restated yet, which is the Committee on Civil Service and Committee on Constitutional Amendments, so that we do not be misinterpreted. May I move that her motion or her proposal be referred first to the Committee on Rules? I promise to report it out as early as tomorrow, Mr. President, just to make sure that we're not crossing any points on the issues raised, Mr. President.
What is the response of the distinguished lady to the appeal of the majority leader?
Mr. President, with the assurance of the good majority leader to refer my speech soonest to the appropriate committees according to the Committee on Rules, I yield to the wisdom of the majority leader, Mr. President.
Majority leader. There is no objection from the gentlelady.
Yeah, if there is no objection, Mr. President, I restate the motion that the privileged speech, the entire privileged speech, be referred to the Committee on Rules with the assurance that the Rules Committee will report it out tomorrow.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last September 6, the Chamber approved on second reading Senate Bill 909 under Committee Report number 77. This is the bill on illegal gambling activities sponsored by Senator Lacson. However, some members of the Senate, particularly Senator Gatchalian, is requesting that he be allowed to introduce further amendments to the said measure by tomorrow. But today is the last day for any reconsideration. I therefore, the sponsor has agreed, for the record, on this request. So I move to reconsider the approval of, on second reading of Senate Bill 909 under Committee Report 77.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
We will open the period of individual amendments tomorrow, Mr. President. I move that the Senate Bill 909 be suspended. Consideration be
Is there
suspended first.
any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
We have a few minutes of suspension, Mr. President.
Minute suspension, session is suspended.
Sabi ko kayo.
Because Josie ran for governor, nagkamali siya. He ran against the gang. So, talo si Josie. Si Josie nga ngayon, bumalik siya sa stage. Hindi siya manalo.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1557 under Committee Report 155.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on salary schedule for civilian government personnel and military uniformed personnel. The parliamentary status of the measure is we're still in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Senator Antonio Trillanes IV. And may we know if there are interpellators? May we know also from the sponsor if there is anyone who has reserved or made any interpellations, reservations for interpellations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, to my knowledge, nobody has reserved the right to interpellate during the period, Mr. President.
In that case, Mr.
With the
President,
permission of the Majority Leader, I may have a few questions with regard to the... I can do that immediately, Mr. President.
would you like to go on with it?
I could
now?
start today if necessary, Mr. President.
If necessary.
Yes. This is a similar bill filed in the previous Congress.
May I have 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session is suspended.
Session is resumed. On the floor is Senator Antonio Trillanes IV to interpellate the President pro tem, Senator Ralph Recto.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the distinguished gentleman, Chairman of the Civil Service Committee, yield to a few questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Willingly, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just a few questions from this representative. How will this bill affect those in the military today?
Mr. President, the bill is basically the same or continuation of the executive order signed by President Aquino.
Which is being implemented by this administration, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
No.
We are now on the second tranche.
That is correct, Mr. President. And having said that, Mr. President, in effect, there is existing law that if the salary of the military personnel, active military personnel increases, the retirement benefits of those with the military should increase as well. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. President. The law, the retirement law as it is, indexed the retirement pay to this present salary of the officers and men.
That is correct. And in this case, if it is based on the EO, the increases of the military here is not reflected in their salary but in an allowance. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
Therefore, shortchanging those who have retired from the military, because it will not be computed in their retirement benefits. Is that correct?
Yes, that's accurate, Mr. President. However,
the intention of the bill is not really to shortchange anyone, but to also mitigate the budgetary impact of any increase in the base pay of
Yes.
the military personnel.
And when we talk about the budgetary impact, we're talking those who have retired.
Yes, yes,
So in
Mr.
effect,
President.
ayaw natin lumaki yung retirement benefits sa military na retired.
Yes, Mr. President. Unfortunately, this is the only version that everybody could agree on. This representation actually passed a more generous compensation, even for the not only for the existing or the active military personnel, but also, therefore, by extension, the retirees as well.
Yes.
However, since it will not move forward in that form, we tried to compensate these benefits of retirees through other measures, Mr. President.
Yeah. My position is this, Mr. President. I think we should not shortchange those in the military today, meaning to say, when they enter the military, there is an existing law. Now, when you retire, tataas din yung retirement mo based on a formula. Now, what we could do is moving forward, let's not be an Indian giver, meaning to say that for yung bagong entrance pa lang, yun ang pwede natin gawin na bagong batas, you will have a different retirement schedule. But those in the system today should be able to get what is rightfully theirs under existing law. That is my personal position. Would the gentleman, and I've filed the corresponding bill to address that issue, meaning to say, let's say, for example, we pass a law that all new entrants to the military will have, yung bago pa lang, let's say next year or by the year 2020, all those yung napapasok, dun pa lang magkakaroon ng bagong retirement benefits sa kanila. So today, all government employees sa GSIS. Yung sundalo, magiging member din ng GSIS, let's say Plan B, for the future. But it is unfair for the retirees today and those who are in the active service today, knowing that when they signed up to this, they already have an existing benefit package, which we are taking away in this bill following the EO implemented in the previous administration being implemented today by this administration. Is that correct?
Mr. President, this representative definitely agrees with the gentleman from Batangas, and Joel, just to inform the gentleman, this bill actually is being pushed in tandem with other bills as well, Mr. President, one of which is precisely what the gentleman was suggesting earlier, that the new entrants would follow or would be covered by a new retirement system.
That is correct.
And it's being studied now, as I understand, by the Department of Budget and Management. And the other bill, it's a stopgap measure, basically, which is the Provisional Enlisted Personnel Bill, would have a similar effect. But I totally understand where the gentleman is coming from. We did not want to shortchange anyone.
Yes.
However, we need to have a stopgap measure so that this bill can move forward and that we can pass a legislation consistent with the provisions of the Constitution that raises in salary could only be legislated, Mr. President.
That is correct. And that is why we're discussing this bill. Is there a problem with the EO?
There is no problem per se, but the problem lies with its constitutionality, precisely because of that.
And that's why, because today that is being implemented through an executive order. And there might be a constitutional infirmity, and that is why you have reported out this bill on the floor. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President. That's precisely the reason why we need to have a stopgap measure.
Okay. Having said that, Mr. President, would the gentleman be willing to accept an amendment at the appropriate time with regard to the provision here on the military?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
On another point, maybe this could be my last point, will be on the local government unit. Does this salary standardization 4 apply to LGUs?
Yes, Mr. President, but subject to availability of funds and for as long as it's consistent with other laws, Mr.
Subject to the availability of funds. There are many circulars from the DBM, such as, for example, and possibly some laws also, that limits the PS of LGUs to, say, 40%. They may have the funds to pay for the salary increases, but the problem is there are circulars that the DBM or even the DILG may have come out that says you cannot spend more of your budget on increases in salaries. Now, my problem with this is this. Isn't the philosophy of this bill equal pay for equal work?
I believe so, Mr. President.
Now, kung pareho lang ang salary grade ng isang nasa LGU, pareho ang ginagawa nila sa LGU at sa national government, why should they be paid differently?
Well, I believe while the intention is not so, but because, as mentioned by the gentleman from Batangas, that there are other laws and circulars that prohibit such a situation, Mr. President. And this representative is very much willing to accommodate to whatever input.
Yes, Mr. President. So at the appropriate time, would the gentleman, the sponsor of this measure, agree to an amendment allowing the LGUs to implement it as well at the local government level? The same salary standardization. After all, we are calling it salary standardization law. It should apply to everyone. Isn't that correct?
Yes, Mr. President, that's very much fair.
Yes. Thank you.
Fair proposal.
And finally, does this apply also to GOCCs?
I believe the GOCCs have a different salary schedule, so it's not covered. They're not covered.
So at the very least, for the military, the LGU, the police, and the national government. Yes, so having said that, those are my comments and manifestations, and at the appropriate time, I will propose some of these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Session suspended. Tapos. to. Individual, ha? Yes. Tapos ano natin? Okay. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move to close the period of interpellation on Senate Bill 1557 under Committee Report 155.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1557 under Committee Report 155.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1461 under Committee Report 98.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the Electric Cooperative Emergency and Resiliency Act of 2017, parliamentary status of measure. We have terminated the period of interpellations. I move to open the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, considering that the measure is a substitute bill, would like to recognize the sponsor for his individual amendments. Senator Wayne Gatchalian, Mr. President.
Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. May I respectfully correct the Majority Floor Leader? This is not a substitute bill.
It's not. I stand corrected, Mr. President. Therefore, I move to open the period of committee amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page
Session suspended for a minute.
Ano ba?
Substitute bill daw. Individual amendments.
Per individual na pag-click
Hindi alam na sponsor.
Ibos yan, sir. Ibos yan. Hi, sir.
Individual amendment.
Oh, individual amendments yan. Meron ka dito? Si Mix din eh. Si Mix din. We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
I would like to correct the earlier motion, Mr. President. I withdraw the motion to open the period of committee amendments because indeed I was right the first time. This is a substitute bill, Mr. President. Therefore, well, let me move first to withdraw the period of committee amendments, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
I now move to open the period of individual amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we now recognize Senator Sherwin Gatchalian for his
Senator
individual amendments.
Gatchalian is recognized for the period of individual amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very sorry for the confusion. The following are my individual amendments. On page 7, line 6, delete the word resilience and replace it with the word resiliency. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Still on the same page, line 7, delete the word reports and replace it with the words assessment and plans. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Still on the same page, line 13, delete the word reports and replace it with the words assessment and plans. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
On page 8, line 9, after the word mature and before the period, insert colon, provided comma, that the amount shall not be used for conversion of a calamity loan into grant. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Still on the same page, delete the sentences starting from the word in on line 16 until the period on line 28. Then on line 15, after the period, insert the sentence afterwards, comma, if such amount is still inadequate, comma, the NEA shall seek for the allocation of a supplementary budget from the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Fund, comma, subject to the approval of the President, period. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
That's all for my amendments, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may we now call on the Minority Leader, recognize Senator Franklin Drilon for his individual amendments.
The Minority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President. Amendment.
The Minority Leader is recognized.
On page 1, Mr. President, line 7, delete on line 7 the phrase recognizing that, delete the whole line 8, delete the whole line 8, and on line 9, delete issue. So that we are proposing, our amendment is on from line 7 to line 9, delete the phrase recognizing that the absence of electric service after such is a national security issue. We do not have, firstly, we will debate as to whether really it's a national security issue, so we just propose to delete that. It doesn't affect the substance of the provision, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
Yes. Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
On page 8, Mr. President, before we propose an amendment, it is clear from the bill, as we have pointed out during a period of interpretation, that this is actually carving out 750 million from the Calamity Fund and placing it and placing such fund under the control of the National Electrification Administration to respond to the needs of the cooperatives in cases of natural calamities, force majeure. We have no problems with that, Mr. President. However, we notice that on section 11, on page 8, 20% of the disaster, 20% of the amount is being allocated for disaster prevention, disaster preparedness, disaster mitigation, etc., etc. So this is about 150 million, which will be used for disaster preparedness, for seminars, etc. In order that the spirit of the law will be maintained, we propose the following amendment. On page 8, line 3, delete the phrase in the following manner, delete the entire sentence on line 4, delete the entire sentence on line 5, delete the words on line 6, and on line 7, delete B, 80%, parenthesis, so that section 11, if the amendment is accepted and approved, shall now read, allocation of the Electric Cooperatives Emergency and Resiliency Fund. The Electric Cooperatives Emergency and Resiliency Fund shall be allocated for the restoration or rehabilitation of the electric cooperatives' damaged infrastructures after a fortuitous event or force majeure. In other words, we just want to make sure that the entire amount is spent for rehabilitation. We propose that amendment, Mr. President, so that it is really used for rehabilitation, because words like disaster prevention, disaster preparedness, disaster mitigation are so broad that anything can be justified under that phraseology. But if it is only for rehabilitation after a 42 event, then it is very clear that the projects will be undertaken is really to assist the electric cooperatives if there is a force majeure.
Does the sponsor accept?
1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended for a minute. Tama na yun. Tama na.
Kasi na pwede na pa naghihintay mga taga-theories. Naghihintay mga taga-theories since 3 o'clock. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
May we know if the distinguished gentleman from Valenzuela is accepting the amendment of the minority leader?
I accept, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. We may continue. Mr. President, there is no objection. He has accepted the
Is there
amendment.
any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, because of time constraints and possible amendment being proposed again by the sponsor, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1461 under Committee Report 98. We'll take it up tomorrow, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, September 12, 2017.
Session is adjourned until 3 p.m. Tuesday, September. Ano ba bukas? 12.